Hey everyone, it's me again. Before I tell you this story, I need you guys to buckle up because what I'm about to share with you is going to make your blood boil. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for the ending because, well, let's just say karma has a way of working things out. My name is Linda. I'm 58 years old and I've been a widow for the past 6 years. My husband passed away from cancer, and let me tell you, watching the love of your life slowly fade away changes you in ways you never imagine. But that's not even the worst part of this story. No, the worst part comes from the people who were supposed to love and support me through it all. I have one son, Jake, who's 32 now. He's married to this woman, and I use that term loosely, named Brittany. They've been together for about 4 years, married for 2. They don't have kids yet, though Brittany always makes these passive-aggressive comments about how some people had their children too young and didn't get to live their lives, as if raising Jake and sacrificing everything for 20-plus years was somehow a mistake on my part. Let me paint you a picture of my life after my husband died. I worked 2 jobs, one at a local grocery store during the day and another cleaning offices at night, just to keep the house my husband and I had built together. This wasn't just any house, you guys. This was our dream home. We'd saved for 15 years to buy the land, and my husband literally built most of it with his own hands. Every room held memories of Jake growing up, of Christmas mornings, of family dinners where we actually talked to each other instead of staring at phones. But here's where it gets interesting. When Jake got engaged to Brittany, suddenly they started showing a lot more interest in my living situation. They'd come over for dinner, which I always cooked from scratch, by the way, and Brittany would walk around the house like she was appraising it. She'd make comments like, "This place is so big for just one person," or "It must be so expensive to maintain all this space." At first, I thought she was just being conversational, maybe even concerned about me. How naive was I? You guys are going to think I'm crazy, but I actually started looking forward to their visits. After losing my husband, I was so lonely that any family time felt like a blessing. I'd spend entire days preparing their favorite meals, making sure the house was spotless, buying special groceries I couldn't really afford just to make them happy. Jake used to love my homemade lasagna when he was growing up. He'd ask for it every birthday, every celebration. So when they'd come over, I'd spend hours making it from scratch. The sauce, the noodles, everything. I'd watch his face light up when he'd take that first bite, and for a moment, it felt like I had my little boy back. But Brittany? Oh, Brittany had opinions about everything. "Linda, you know carbs are really bad for you at your age," she'd say while Jake was literally going back for seconds. "Maybe we should look into some healthier meal options." This woman was eating my food, sitting at my table, and criticizing my cooking. But I bit my tongue because I didn't want to cause problems between Jake and me. The comments got worse over time. She'd walk through my house and point out things that needed fixing. "That wallpaper is so outdated," or "These appliances are like from the Stone Age." She wasn't offering to help fix anything, mind you, just pointing out flaws in the home my husband and I had poured our hearts into. But wait, it gets better. About 6 months into their marriage, Jake started bringing up the idea of me selling the house. "Mom, it's just too much for you," he'd say. "The maintenance, the utilities, the property taxes. You could get a nice little apartment somewhere and have money left over to enjoy your retirement." Retirement? I was working 70 hours a week just to keep my head above water. What retirement? Here's what really got to me, though. They weren't suggesting this out of concern for my well-being. Oh no! Every conversation about me selling the house somehow circled back to how they were struggling to save for their own house, how expensive everything was for young couples nowadays, how unfair it was that older people got to keep all the good real estate while young families suffered. I'm going to pause here because I need you guys to understand something. After my husband died, I refinanced the house to pay for his medical bills. Cancer treatment isn't cheap, and even with insurance, we had hundreds of thousands in debt. I took out a second mortgage, used up our entire savings, and was still making payments on medical bills. The house might have looked like an asset from the outside, but it was costing me everything I had just to keep it. But did Jake know this? Did he ever ask about my financial situation or offer to help? Of course not. He just saw a big house and dollar signs. The pressure to sell kept building. They'd bring it up at every visit, every phone call. Brittany even started looking up real estate listings in my area and showing them to me. Look, Linda, this house just like yours sold for $450,000. Think about what you could do with that money. What she didn't mention was that after paying off my mortgages and medical debt, I'd be lucky to walk away with enough for a security deposit on an apartment. Then came the vacation invitation that changed everything. It was March when Jake called me all excited. Mom, guess what? Brittany found this incredible deal on a Caribbean cruise. 3 weeks in paradise. And the best part is, they have a special rate for families. We want you to come with us. You guys, I literally started crying on the phone. When was the last time my son had invited me anywhere? When was the last time I'd been on a vacation? I couldn't even remember. The last trip I had taken was to visit my sister 2 states away, and that was just a weekend drive. But honey, I can't afford a cruise. You know money's tight for me right now. Don't worry about that, Mom, Jake said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. This is our treat. Consider it an early Mother's Day gift. You've been working so hard and you deserve this. I should have known something was up. When had Jake ever spent money on me without expecting something in return? But I was so desperate for connection, so starved for family time, that I convinced myself he was finally growing up, finally recognizing everything I'd done for him. Brittany got on the phone, all sweet and excited. Linda, we're going to have such an amazing time. I've already looked at all the excursions. There's shopping, spa treatments, beautiful beaches. It's going to be perfect. For 2 weeks, I could barely sleep from excitement. I used my credit card. Yes, the one I was trying to pay down, to buy cruise clothes. I got my hair done, bought new makeup, even splurged on a pedicure. I felt like Cinderella getting ready for the ball. I should have known it was too good to be true. The first red flag was when they picked me up for the airport. I had packed 1 large suitcase and a carry-on, nothing crazy, but when Jake saw my luggage, he frowned. Mom, that's a lot of stuff for a vacation. It's 3 weeks, honey. I needed options. Brittany chimed in from the passenger seat. We're trying to pack light, Linda. The cruise has laundry services if you need them. I felt embarrassed, like I'd already done something wrong and we hadn't even left yet. But I just smiled and said, of course, you're right. I always overpack. The flight to Miami was actually nice. Jake sat next to me, and for a few hours it felt like old times. We talked about his work, about memories from when he was little. I was starting to think this really was going to be the bonding experience I had hoped for. But then we got to Miami, and everything changed. We were supposed to have a 6-hour layover before our connecting flight to the island where the cruise departed. Jake suggested we grab dinner at one of the airport restaurants, which sounded perfect to me. I was happy to pay since they'd covered the cruise. We found this nice little place with outdoor seating, and I was feeling so grateful and optimistic about our trip. The conversation was flowing, and I was thinking about how I'd tell everyone back home about my wonderful vacation with my son and daughter-in-law. That's when Jake and Brittany exchanged one of those looks. You know the ones I'm talking about, when couples communicate without words. My stomach dropped because I recognized that look from when my husband and I used to share secrets. But this wasn't a good secret. Mom, Jake started, and his whole tone had changed. Gone was the warm, excited son from the plane. This was the voice he used when he was about to tell me something I didn't want to hear. We need to talk to you about something. Brittany immediately jumped in. We've been thinking a lot about your situation, Linda. About the house, about your finances, about your future. I felt my chest tighten. What do you mean, my situation? Jake leaned forward, trying to look concerned but failing miserably. Mom, you're struggling. We can see it. The house is falling apart. You're working yourself to death. And for what? To maintain a property that's way too big for one person? We care about you, Brittany added, and I swear her voice sounded rehearsed. We want what's best for you. You guys are probably already seeing where this is going, but I was still in denial. I appreciate your concern, but I'm managing just fine. That's when Jake dropped the bomb. Actually, Mom, we've already talked to a real estate agent. There's someone interested in the house. They're willing to make a cash offer, significantly above market value. This could solve all your problems. My blood ran cold. You did what? Brittany reached across the table like she was going to comfort me, but I pulled my hand away. We knew you'd be resistant to the idea, so we thought if we could show you how much money you could make, you'd see that this is the right choice. The right choice for who? My voice was getting louder and people at nearby tables were starting to look. Jake's facade of concern was dropping fast. For everyone, Mom, you'll have financial security and we'll have a chance to start building our own future. And there it was, the truth I'd been too blind to see. You mean you'll have a chance to get your hands on the money from my house sale? That's not what this is about, Brittany said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then what is it about? Because last I checked, that house belongs to me. I didn't ask for your help selling it. Jake's frustration was showing now. Mom, be realistic. You can't keep that house. You're barely hanging on as it is. This way, everyone wins. Everyone wins? How exactly do I... I stared at them both, finally seeing clearly. This entire vacation, this generous gift they'd given me, was a setup. They'd brought me thousands of miles from home to corner me into selling my house. But wait, you guys, it gets so much worse than that. Here's what we're thinking, Jake continued, apparently oblivious to my growing horror. You sell the house, pay off your debts, and then you can help us with our down payment. We found this perfect place, but we need help with the 20% down. It would be like an investment in our future, which is really your future too, since we're your family. I couldn't speak. I literally could not form words. They wanted me to sell my home, the only thing I had left of my husband, and give them the proceeds so they could buy their dream house while I, lived in some tiny apartment with whatever scraps were left? Plus, Brittany added, once we have our own place, there would always be room for you, like a guest room or something. You could visit whenever you wanted. Visit. My own son was talking about me visiting him in the house I'd essentially buy for him. I can't believe this. I finally managed to say, I cannot believe you brought me here to ambush me like this. Jake's patience was wearing thin. Nobody's ambushing you, Mom. We're trying to help you see reason. You're being stubborn about something that doesn't make financial sense. It doesn't make financial sense for me to keep my own home. Not when you can't afford it. Brittany said flatly, look, Linda, we love you, but we're not going to enable you to make poor financial decisions. This is what needs to happen. That word, enable, like I was some kind of addict they needed to stage an intervention for wanting to keep my own home. I stood up from the table. I need to use the restroom. I walked away on shaky legs, my mind racing. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror and tried to process what had just happened. My son had manipulated me into this vacation just to pressure me into selling my house. They'd planned this. They'd rehearsed this conversation. And we were thousands of miles from home with 2 more weeks of this trip ahead of us. When I got back to the table, their whole demeanor had changed. The fake warmth was gone, replaced by cold determination. So, Jake said without preamble, we need an answer, Mom. The real estate agent needs to know by tomorrow if you're interested. Tomorrow? Jake, this is my home we're talking about. I can't make a decision like this in 24 hours. Why not? It's not like you have other options. You're going to lose the house anyway if you can't keep up with the payments. How do you know what I can and can't keep up with? When's the last time either of you asked about my actual financial situation instead of just assuming? Jake's face hardened. Fine. Let's talk about your actual financial situation. You're working 2 jobs and barely making ends meet. You've refinanced the house twice. You're carrying credit card debt and medical bills from Dad's treatment. Did I miss anything? I felt like I'd been slapped. How did he know all this? I'd never discussed my finances with him in detail. We're not stupid, Mom. We can see the signs. Plus, when you refinanced last year, Jake was still on the deed from when Dad put him on it years ago. We got copies of all the paperwork. My son had been monitoring my financial situation, behind my back, like I was incompetent. So you see, Jake continued, This isn't really a choice. It's inevitable. We're just trying to help you do it on your terms, with our support, instead of waiting for the bank to foreclose. The bank wasn't going to foreclose. Yes, money was tight, but I was making my payments. Barely, but I was making them. They were painting a picture of desperation that wasn't entirely accurate to justify their own greed. But here's the thing, you guys. Even if everything they were saying was true, even if I was in financial trouble, the way they were handling it was cruel and manipulative. They didn't offer to help me keep the house. They didn't suggest other solutions. They went straight to sell everything and give us the money. I need to think about this. There's nothing to think about. Jake, you're not being rational about this. And that's when something inside me snapped. Rational? You want to talk about rational? What's rational about me giving up my home so you two can have your dream house? What's rational about me having no place to live so you can have your dream house? You'd have a place to live, Brittany said. We already told you you could get an apartment. With what money? After paying off my debts and giving you guys the down payment, what exactly do you think I'd have left? They looked at each other again, and I realized they'd never actually thought about that part. They'd calculated how much they needed from me, but they'd never calculated what I'd need to survive. The boarding announcement for our connecting flight echoed through the terminal. We should get going, Jake said, standing up. We can continue this conversation on the ship. As we walked toward the gate, I felt like I was walking toward my execution. They had me trapped on this vacation, thousands of miles from home, with 2 more weeks of this pressure ahead of me. And for the first time since my husband died, I felt truly, completely alone. But you guys, what happened next, that's when this story really begins. Because I had no idea that while I was feeling sorry for myself at 30,000 feet, Jake and Brittany were putting part 2 of their plan into motion. And when I found out what they'd done behind my back while we were on that beautiful Caribbean cruise, well, let's just say that's when quiet, accommodating Linda disappeared forever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, let me tell you about the worst 3 weeks of my life and how my own son showed me exactly who he really was. The flight to the island was a nightmare. Jake and Brittany spent the entire time tag-teaming me with reasons why selling the house was my only option. They'd clearly planned this presentation, taking turns between playing good cop and bad cop. Brittany would say things like, I know this is emotional, Linda, but sometimes we have to make hard choices for our own good. Then Jake would jump in with, Mom, I'm worried about you. What happens if you get sick? What happens if you can't work anymore? At least this way you'd have some financial cushion. They weren't listening to my concerns or acknowledging my feelings. They were just wearing me down with repetition, like water against a stone. When we finally arrived at the cruise port, I was exhausted and emotionally drained. The ship was beautiful, everything they'd promised and more, but I couldn't enjoy any of it because this dark cloud was hanging over everything. Our first night at dinner, they kept bringing up the house sale. Other passengers at our table were probably wondering why this family was discussing real estate on a luxury cruise, but Jake and Brittany didn't care. They were on a mission. So, Mom, have you thought any more about what we discussed? Jake asked as I was trying to enjoy what was supposed to be a celebration dinner. Jake, please, can we just try to enjoy the vacation? This is important, Mom. The real estate agent is expecting an answer. I put down my fork. What's the rush? If this is such a great opportunity, why does it have to happen right now? Brittany and Jake exchanged another one of those looks. Actually, Brittany said slowly, there's something else we need to tell you. My stomach dropped. Again. We may have already initiated some preliminary steps, Jake said. What kind of preliminary steps? Well, we thought it would be helpful to get the ball rolling, Brittany explained. You know, to show you how easy the process could be. What did you do? Jake took a deep breath. We scheduled a home inspection for next week, just to get an accurate assessment of the property value. You guys, I think I blacked out for a second. They had scheduled strangers to come into my home without my permission while I was out of the country. You did what? "It's not a big deal, Mom," Jake said quickly. "It's just an inspection, nothing set in stone." "How did you even— I didn't give you permission to do that." "I still have a key," Jake admitted, "and technically I'm still on the deed, so I have the right to schedule an inspection." I was shaking, literally shaking with rage. "Take me home." "What?" "Take me home right now. I want to go home." "Mom, you're overreacting," Brittany said. "It's just an inspection." "It's my house. You had no right to do that." People at nearby tables were definitely staring now, but I didn't care. My son had violated my privacy and my trust in the most fundamental way possible. "Look," Jake said, lowering his voice, "what's done is done. The inspection is happening whether you're there or not. Might as well enjoy the cruise." And that, you guys, was the moment I realized my son didn't just want my money. He wanted to control me. He wanted to make my decisions for me because he thought he knew better than I did about my own life. But here's what Jake and Brittany didn't know. Here's what they'd completely underestimated. Their quiet, accommodating mother was about to become their worst nightmare. Because while they thought they were backing me into a corner with no options, they'd actually just lit a fire under someone who had absolutely nothing left to lose. And when someone with nothing to lose decides to fight back, well, you guys are about to find out exactly what that looks like. The next 2.5 weeks on that cruise were psychological warfare. I'm not even exaggerating. Every single day, Jake and Brittany would corner me somewhere, by the pool, at dinner, during excursions, and pressure me about the house sale. They'd already crossed the line by scheduling that inspection, but they kept pushing further. Brittany started showing me apartment listings on her phone during breakfast. "Look, Linda, this one's only $1,200 a month, and it's in a nice area." $1,200? That was more than half of what I made at both my jobs combined. But when I pointed that out, Jake just said, "Well, you wouldn't need to work as much once you have the money from the house sale." "What money?" After paying off my mortgages and medical debt, I'd calculated that I might have $50,000 left if I was lucky. That might sound like a lot to some people, but when you're 58 years old, with no retirement savings and no job security, $50,000 isn't going to last very long. But here's the thing that really got to me. They stopped pretending this was about my well-being. By week 2, they were openly talking about their future house, their plans, their dreams, all funded by my sacrifice. "We found this amazing place with a 3-car garage, and the kitchen has granite countertops and stainless steel appliances." "Sounds expensive," I said flatly. "Well, that's why we need a good down payment, but with your contribution, we can afford something really nice." My contribution. Like I was a business partner instead of my mother being manipulated out of her home. The worst part was how they'd turned other passengers against me without even realizing it. We'd made friends with this lovely couple from Texas, and Jake and Brittany had told them all about how stubborn I was being about selling my house. "Sometimes older folks have trouble letting go," the woman said to me sympathetically one day, "but your son is just looking out for you." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just smiled and nodded because what was I supposed to say? That my son was trying to steal my house? That I was trapped on this ship with people who were supposed to love me but were actually destroying my life? By the last week, I was having panic attacks. Real ones. I'd wake up in the middle of the night gasping for air, thinking about going home to find strangers trampling through my house, evaluating my husband's handiwork like it was just another piece of property to flip. Jake noticed my distress, but instead of backing off, he doubled down. "Mom, you're making this way harder than it needs to be. We're trying to help you, but you won't let us." "Help me what? Become homeless?" "You're not going to be homeless. You're being dramatic." Dramatic. There's that word that people use when they want to dismiss your very real concerns, when they want to make you feel crazy for having normal emotional reactions to abnormal situations. "Jake," I said, trying one last time to reach the son I thought I knew, "this house isn't just an asset to me. It's where your father and I built our life together. It's where you grew up. Every room has memories that I can't replace." Brittany rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes at my grief. "Memories don't pay bills, Linda, and you can't eat nostalgia." That's when I knew These people weren't my family anymore. Family doesn't dismiss your feelings. Family doesn't manipulate you when you're vulnerable. Family doesn't steal from you and call it help. But I played along for the rest of the cruise because I figured once we got home, I could put some distance between us and think clearly about my options. Oh, you guys, I had no idea what they had planned for me. Our last day on the ship, I was actually feeling a little better. I'd made my decision. I wasn't selling the house, and I didn't care what Jake and Brittany thought about it. They could be angry, they could cut me out of their lives, but I wasn't going to be bullied into giving up everything I had left. I was looking forward to getting home, sleeping in my own bed, and figuring out how to move forward without them in my life. We were flying back through Miami with the same 6-hour layover, then connecting to our home airport. I remember thinking how different I felt compared to 3 weeks earlier. I was sadder, but stronger, if that makes sense. I've lost my illusions about my son, but I'd found my backbone. The flight from the island to Miami was normal. Jake and Brittany were talking about work, about getting back to their routine. I was just counting down the hours until I could be alone in my own space. When we landed in Miami, we went through customs and found a restaurant for dinner before our connecting flight. I was actually feeling pretty good. We were almost home, and I'd survived 3 weeks of constant pressure without caving. That's when Jake got a phone call. He stepped away from the table to answer it, and when he came back, his whole demeanor had changed. He looked excited? Nervous? I couldn't quite read his expression. "Who was that?" Brittany asked. "Work stuff," Jake said quickly. "Nothing important." But I could tell he was lying. There was this energy coming off him, like he was barely containing some kind of anticipation. We finished dinner and headed toward our gate. Our flight was supposed to board in about an hour. I was checking my phone, not really paying attention to Jake and Brittany's conversation, when I heard Brittany say something that made my blood freeze. "Are you sure this is going to work?" "Trust me," Jake replied in a low voice. "She doesn't have any other choice." I looked up from my phone. "What are you guys talking about?" "Nothing, Mom," Jake said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when the boarding announcement came over the intercom. But it wasn't for our flight. Now boarding flight 847 to Denver, boarding all passengers. Jake and Brittany both stood up. "Come on," Jake said to Brittany. "We need to go." I looked at them in confusion. "Go where? Our flight doesn't board for another hour." Jake finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Something cold and calculating. "Mom, there's been a change of plans." "What do you mean?" Brittany was already grabbing her carry-on bag. "We're not taking the same flight home." My heart started pounding. "What are you talking about?" "We're going to Denver for a few days. Brittany's never been, and we found a great deal on a hotel." I stared at them, not understanding. "But what about me? What about our flight home?" And that's when Jake said the words that changed everything between us forever. "You're not coming with us, Mom. You're going home alone." "But Jake, I don't have a ticket for just me. Our tickets are together. Family package, remember?" Brittany was checking her phone. "Actually, Linda, your ticket is separate. We checked with the airline yesterday." "Yesterday? When yesterday?" "When you were getting that massage at the spa. We took care of some travel arrangements." I felt like the ground was disappearing beneath my feet. "What travel arrangements?" "Your ticket home," Brittany said impatiently. "We have a confirmed seat on the flight in an hour. We'll be going to Denver." Something was very, very wrong here. Wait a minute. You planned this? You knew we weren't all flying home together and you didn't tell me? "We're telling you now." "But why? Why wouldn't you tell me before now?" They looked at each other again, and I knew. Whatever they were about to tell me was going to be bad. "Because we knew you would overreact. The truth is, Mom, we need some time to think about our relationship moving forward. After this whole house situation, We think some space would be good for everyone." Space. They wanted space. After manipulating me into this vacation, after pressuring me for 3 weeks, after scheduling inspections of my home without permission, they wanted space? So you're just abandoning me in Miami? "You're not being abandoned," Jake said. "You have a ticket home. You'll be fine." "Final boarding call for Flight 847 to Denver." "We really need to go," Brittany said, slinging her purse over her shoulder. I stood there, panic rising in my chest. "Jake, wait. I don't understand what's happening here." "It's simple, Mom. You go home. We go to Denver. We'll talk in a few days when everyone has had time to cool off." Cool off from what? I didn't do anything wrong. But they were already walking away. Jake turned back once and called out, "Your flight's gate B15. You'll be fine, Mom." And then they were gone. I stood there in that Miami airport, watching my son and his wife disappear into the crowd, and I couldn't process what just happened. They'd left me. Actually left me alone in an airport in a city I didn't know, thousands of miles from home. I stumbled back to my chair and tried to think. "Okay," I told myself. "You have a ticket home. Just get on the plane and deal with this when you're back in familiar territory." But when I went to check in for my flight, that's when I discovered the real scope of their betrayal. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's no ticket under that name for this flight." "That's impossible. My son just told me I had a confirmed seat." She checked again. "I'm not showing anything. Do you have a confirmation number?" I didn't. Jake had been handling all our travel arrangements. I started digging through my purse, looking for any paperwork, any proof that I was supposed to be on that flight. Nothing. "Ma'am, this flight is completely sold out. Even if we could find your reservation, there are no seats available." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone to call Jake. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Brittany's phone. Voicemail. They'd turned off their phones. I went back to the gate agent. "Please, there has to be something. I need to get home." "I understand, ma'am. Let me check other flights today." She typed for what felt like forever. "I have one seat available on a flight tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. It's $847. $847. I didn't have $847. I had maybe $200 in my checking account and a credit card that was already maxed out. "Is there anything cheaper?" I asked, in my voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, but with such short notice, that's the best I can do." I walked away from the counter on shaky legs and found a quiet corner where I could think. Jake and Brittany had left me stranded in Miami with no way to get home and no money for a ticket. But it gets worse, you guys, so much worse. Because when I finally broke down and called my credit card company to see if I could somehow charge the flight, I discovered that my card had been frozen for suspicious activity. "What suspicious activity?" I asked the customer service representative. "It looks like there was a large charge attempted this morning that was declined. Our fraud protection kicked in." "What charge?" "Let me see. It was for $3,200 at a real estate office in your hometown." My world tilted sideways. While I was on that cruise, while they were pressuring me to sell my house, Jake and Brittany had tried to use my credit card to pay for real estate services. They'd been planning to force the sale whether I agreed or not. And when the charge was declined, because thank God my credit limit wasn't that high, they'd moved to Plan B. Strand me in Miami so they could go home and do whatever they wanted without me there to stop them. I was sitting in that airport chair completely alone and powerless when I realized the full scope of what they had done to me. This wasn't just about wanting me to sell my house. This was about taking control of my life completely. But here's the thing about rock bottom, you guys. Once you hit it, there's nowhere to go but up. I sat in that chair for maybe 10 minutes, feeling sorry for myself and wondering how my life had gone completely off the rails. And then something clicked. I wasn't some helpless victim. I was a 58-year-old woman who'd survived losing her husband, who'd worked 2 jobs to keep her home, who'd raised a son by herself for the last 6 years. I'd been through worse than this and survived. Jake and Brittany thought they'd backed me into a corner with no options. But they'd forgotten something important. I still had friends. Real friends. People who actually cared about me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Sarah Martinez. Sarah had been my best friend since high school. She'd moved to Florida 10 years ago, but we still talked every week. More importantly, Sarah had always seen right through Jake's act. "Linda!" Sarah answered on the second ring. "How's the cruise? Are you having an amazing time?" I started crying before I could get a single word out. "Honey, what's wrong? What happened?" Through tears, I told her everything. The pressure to sell the house, the home inspection they'd scheduled, being abandoned at the airport with no way home. "Those absolute bastards," Sarah said when I finished. "Where are you right now?" "Miami Airport." "Okay, don't move. I'm booking you a flight right now. What airport do you need to get to?" 20 minutes later, Sarah had booked me on a flight home leaving in 3 hours. She'd paid for it with her credit card and refused to let me worry about paying her back. "We'll figure that out later," she said. "Right now, just get home." But as I was sitting in that departure lounge, waiting for my flight, something was building inside me. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't fear. It was pure, white-hot rage. Jake and Brittany thought they could manipulate me, steal from me, abandon me, and then waltz back into my life when it was convenient for them. They thought I'd just accept their treatment and be grateful for whatever scraps of attention they threw my way. They were about to learn that they'd messed with the wrong woman. The flight home gave me 3 hours to plan, and by the time we landed, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Sarah picked me up at the airport. She took one look at my face and said, "Uh-oh, I know that expression. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time Jake and Brittany learned some consequences for their actions." Sarah grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that. What do you need?" The first thing I did was go home and change the locks. All of them. Front door, back door, side door, garage. I called a 24-hour locksmith and paid extra for him to come out immediately. While he was working, I went through the house and gathered up everything that belonged to Jake and Brittany. And you guys, there was a lot. Apparently, they'd been using my house as their personal storage unit for years. Jake's old baseball card collection, Brittany's winter clothes, wedding gifts they hadn't had room for in their apartment, photo albums, books, kitchen appliances I had bought them as housewarming gifts that they'd never bothered to take with them. All of it went into boxes and garbage bags. By the time the locksmith finished, I had 23 boxes and bags of their stuff sitting in my living room. Sarah had been helping me, and she was laughing her head off. "Linda, you're like a woman possessed. This is amazing." "I'm just getting started," I told her. The next morning, I loaded all their belongings into Sarah's pickup truck and drove to Jake and Brittany's apartment. They were still in Denver, so I left everything neatly stacked outside their front door with a note. "Since you wanted space, I thought you should have your things in your own space. The locks have been changed. You're no longer welcome in my home. Linda." But that was just the beginning. Remember that home inspection they'd scheduled without my permission? I called the real estate agent and told them exactly what had happened. Turns out scheduling inspections without the property owner's explicit consent is actually illegal. The agent was horrified and immediately reported Jake's behavior to the state licensing board. I also called my bank and had Jake removed from any accounts or documents where he still had access. Turned out he'd been checking my financial records for months, which explained how much he knew about my situation. Then I did something that felt absolutely incredible. I called in sick to both my jobs for the entire week. First time I'd taken more than a day off in 6 years. And what did I do with my week off? I went on vacation, a real vacation, with people who actually cared about me. Sarah had called her sister Emma, who lived 2 hours away. Emma called her daughter Jessica, who lived in the mountains. Before I knew it, I had a whole group of women ready to rally around me and show me what real family support looked like. We rented a cabin in the mountains for 4 days. We hiked, we cooked together, we sat by the fire and talked until late at night. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not someone's burden, not someone's source of money, just Linda. Jessica, who was about Jake's age, said something that really stuck with me. You know what's crazy? You raised a son who thinks so little of you that he'd steal from you and abandon you. But look at how many people showed up for you the minute you asked for help. Who do you think really failed here? She was right. I hadn't failed as a mother by setting boundaries. Jake had failed as a son by crossing them. We were sitting around the fire on our last night when my phone rang. Jake. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Brittany called. Voicemail. Emma looked at me with raised eyebrows. Aren't you curious what they have to say? Not particularly, I said, and I meant it. But when we got back to Sarah's house the next day, I finally listened to the messages. There were 12 of them, and they got progressively more frantic. The first few were angry. Mom, what the hell? Why are her things outside our apartment? Why won't you answer your phone? Then confused. We don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. We were going to come home in a few days anyway. Then worried. Mom, please call us back. We're concerned about you. This isn't like you. And finally, desperate. Mom, we're flying home tonight. We need to talk. This has gotten completely out of hand. Out of hand? They thought my reaction was out of hand. Sarah was reading over my shoulder. Are you going to call them back? Nope, I said, and I meant it. But when we got back to Sarah's house the next day, I finally listened to the messages. There were 12 of them, and they got progressively more frantic. The first few were angry. Mom, what the hell? Why are her things outside our apartment? Why won't you answer your phone? Then confused. We don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. We were going to come home in a few days anyway. Then worried. Mom, please call us back. We're concerned about you. This isn't like you. And finally, desperate. Mom, we're flying home tonight. We need to talk. This has gotten completely out of hand. Out of hand? They thought my reaction was out of hand. Sarah was reading over my shoulder. Are you going to call them back? Nope, I said, and I meant it. But when we got back to Sarah's house the next day, I finally listened to the messages. There were 12 of them, and they got progressively more frantic. The first few were angry. Mom, what the hell? Why are her things outside our apartment? Why won't you answer your phone? Then confused. We don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. We were going to come home in a few days anyway. Then worried. Mom, please call us back. We're concerned about you. This isn't like you. And finally, desperate. Mom, we're flying home tonight. We need to talk. This has gotten completely out of hand. Out of hand? They thought my reaction was out of hand. Sarah was reading over my shoulder. Are you going to call them back? Nope, I said, and I meant it. But when we got back to Sarah's house the next day, I finally listened to the messages. There were 12 of them, and they got progressively more frantic. The first few were angry. Mom, what the hell? Why are her things outside our apartment? Why won't you answer your phone? Then confused. We don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. We were going to come home in a few days anyway. Then worried. Mom, please call us back. We're concerned about you. This isn't like you. And finally, desperate. Mom, we're flying home tonight. We need to talk. This has gotten completely out of hand. Out of hand? They thought my reaction was out of hand. Sarah was reading over my shoulder. Are you going to call them back? Nope, I said, and I meant it. But when we got back to Sarah's house the next day, I finally listened to the messages. There were 12 of them, and they got progressively more frantic. The first few were angry. Mom, what the hell? Why are things outside our apartment? Why won't you answer your phone? Then confused. We don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. We were going to come home in a few days anyway. Then worried. Mom, please call us back. We're concerned about you. This isn't like you. And finally, desperate. Mom, we're flying home tonight. We need to talk. This has gotten completely out of hand. Out of hand? They thought my reaction was out of hand. Sarah was reading over my shoulder. Are you going to call them back? Nope, I said, and I meant it. But when we got back to Sarah's house the next day, I finally listened to the messages. There were 12 of them, and they got progressively more frantic. The first few were angry. Mom, what the hell? Why are things outside our apartment? Why won't you answer your phone? Then confused. We don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. We were going to come home in a few days anyway. Then worried. Mom, please call us back. We're concerned about you. This isn't like you. And finally, desperate. Mom, we're flying home tonight. We need to talk. This has gotten completely out of hand. Out of hand? They thought my reaction was out of hand. Sarah was reading over my shoulder. Are you going to call them back? Nope, I said, and I meant it. But when we got back to Sarah's house the next day, I finally listened to the messages. There were 12 of them, and they got progressively more frantic. The first few were angry. Mom, what the hell? Why are things outside our apartment? Why won't you answer your phone? Then confused. We don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this. We were going to come home in a few days anyway. Then worried. Mom, please call us back. We're concerned about you. This isn't like you. And finally, desperate. Mom, we're flying home. We needed some time to think. Well, congratulations. You got your time to think. And I got mine. And here's what I've decided. I'm done with both of you. I could hear them whispering to each other on the other side of the door. Mom, Jake said finally, we're your family. No, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Sarah is my family. Emma and Jessica are my family. The locksmith who came out at midnight to help me feel safe in my own home is more family to me than you are. You can't be serious about this, Brittany said. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. What about the house? Jake asked. And there it was. Even now, even after everything, that's what he was really concerned about. What about it? Are you still planning to sell it? And that's when I delivered the final blow. Actually, Jake, I have some news about the house. I've decided to renovate it. Sarah's daughter is an interior designer, and we're going to turn it into the dream home your father and I always planned it to be. Should be a fun project. Expensive, though. I'll probably need to take out another loan. The silence from the other side of the door was deafening. But don't worry, I continued. I won't be needing any help with the down payment. I heard footsteps walking away from the door, then a car starting in my driveway. And that was it. They left. I never heard from them again. Well, that's not entirely true. I heard from Jake's lawyer 6 months later when he tried to claim some legal right to the house, since his name was still on the deed from years ago. But Sarah's husband is a lawyer, and he explained to Jake's lawyer exactly how property law works and what constitutes elder abuse. Funny how quickly that legal threat disappeared. It's been 8 months now since the cruise from hell, and I can honestly say my life has never been better. Sarah and her family have become my chosen family. I spend holidays with them, I babysit Sarah's grandchildren, and I have people in my life who actually value me as a person instead of as a source of money. I kept both my jobs because I actually like staying busy, but I'm not killing myself anymore trying to maintain a lifestyle I couldn't afford just to hold on to memories. Instead, I've created new memories in the house my husband built. Better memories. The renovation is almost finished and the house is beautiful. More importantly, it feels like home again, instead of like a burden I was carrying alone. And Jake and Brittany? I heard through mutual friends that they're still renting that apartment, still saving for their dream house. Apparently, without my contribution, they're having trouble coming up with a down payment. Shocking, I know. Sometimes I wonder if Jake ever thinks about what he lost when he chose money over his mother. But then I remember that someone who could abandon their parent in an airport probably isn't capable of that kind of self-reflection. The truth is, I don't miss them. I thought I would, but I don't. You can't miss people who never really loved you in the first place. What I have now is so much better than what I lost. I have people who celebrate my successes instead of trying to profit from them. I have people who support my decisions instead of trying to manipulate them. I have people who would never abandon me in an airport, no matter how angry they were. I have a real family. And sometimes when I'm sitting in my beautiful, renovated living room, surrounded by people who actually care about me, I think about that scared, lonely woman crying in the Miami airport. And I think, thank God Jake and Brittany showed me who they really were. Because if they hadn't, I never would have found out who I really was. I'm Linda. I'm 58 years old. I survived losing my husband. I survived being manipulated by my son. And I survived being abandoned in an airport with nothing but my own strength to rely on. And you know what? I'm stronger than I ever imagined. That's my story, you guys. Thanks for listening. And remember, family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you when the chips are down. Choose your family wisely.